Now to a Target 12 investigators exclusive lost learning. A staggering 6 in 10 Providence Public School students were considered chronically absent this past year.
I've never seen numbers with this many students absent.
The problem has plagued the Providence schools for years.
But student absenteeism was made even worse by the pandemic, raising concerns that children are falling even further behind as the state is trying to turn around the struggling school system.
Target 12 investigator Steph Machado joins us now with the numbers.
More than 13,000 Providence students have been chronically absent this school year, leaving the school district grappling with how to make up for lost time.
8:45, we have a live meeting.
Melissa Palumbo spent this school year teaching first grade on Zoom in Providence's Virtual Learning Academy.
This is my fantastic first graders.
She says many of her first graders did great. It's a big year for learning to read, but some just didn't log on to class.
So I had a student who showed up maybe the first 4 or 5 days and then just stopped showing up.
But the students that weren't showing up in the Zooms, I mean, you must have been worried.
Very worried. Very worried.
Palumbo says she sent messages to parents and alerted administrators.
Short of going to their house and opening the computer and putting them on, there was really nothing else we could do.
Palumbo's experience was not uncommon, according to absence data from the pandemic reviewed by Target 12. As of the end of April, so far this school year, 60% of Providence students have been chronically absent, including both in-person and virtual learners, compared to 37% during the same time period last school year. Chronic absenteeism means a student has missed 10% or more of the school days so far. Every single school in Providence saw an increase in chronic absenteeism during the pandemic. High schools had the highest rate. At Mount Pleasant, a whopping 84% of students have been chronically absent so far, compared to 47% last school year.
This is something that no one has experienced before. Like you said, I've never seen numbers with this many students absent.
Kachara Bradford is the Deputy Superintendent of Learning for the state-controlled Providence schools. She says during the pandemic, the district relaxed enforcement of attendance, understanding the unusual circumstances. In fact, truancy officers were laid off last summer.
Attendance didn't seem as compulsory as it did before.
While some absences were directly due to COVID or other illness, that wasn't always the case. In this high-poverty district, Bradford said older students in particular were tasked with taking care of younger siblings who no longer went to daycare, for example.
There was also just students who this year really needed to get a job to support their families. And so we saw high school students that really were putting going to work above going to school.
Of the nearly 5,000 students who chose full-time virtual learning in Providence this year, 48% have been chronically absent. Palumbo says she fears the true number, though, is even higher because she was told to mark virtual students present if they answered a question of the day on a Google form, even if they didn't actually log on to class.
Would answer the attendance question and would sometimes submit work, but never came to Zooms. So did not receive any instruction at all.
Do you think it's possible for them to make up this learning?
They definitely need to spend another year in first grade or have a very, very intensive program over the summer.
It's still an open question whether students could be held back due to lost learning during the pandemic. A spokesperson for the district says students at risk of not progressing on to another grade have been invited to participate in summer learning. Promotion or retention decisions at the elementary level that typically happen at the end of the school year will now take place at the end of the summer. And Providence is changing its summer learning options to try and tackle this learning loss. Coming up new at 6, we'll have more on those plans and how they aim to get students back to school in the fall. I'm Steph Machado, 12 News.
More now on our Target 12 investigators exclusive Lost Learning.
As we told you on 12 News Now at 5, a staggering 60% of Providence Public School students were chronically absent this year, as many students dealt with unusual circumstances due to the pandemic, such as increased responsibilities at home.
Target 12 investigator Steph Machado joins us now in studio with how the state's largest school district is aiming to make up for lost time.
Every single Providence school saw a jump in chronic absenteeism this year, a pandemic trend the school district hopes to reverse.
A lot of students in our programming that lost a loved one due to the pandemic.
Olabumi Olatunji knows a lot of students who didn't make it to school many days this year.
So I was hearing, hey, I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment with my family. I share a room with siblings. There's no way I'm able to focus in class.
Olatunji is the program director at Youth in Action, a Providence-based organization that works with teens after school. 60% of Providence students had been chronically absent this year as of the end of April, according to data reviewed by Target 12, including both in-person and virtual learners. That's compared to 37% during the same time period last school year. Chronically absent students have missed at least 10% of school days. For a full year, that's 18 days or more. High schools had the highest rate. 84% of students at Mount Pleasant have been chronically absent compared to 47% last school year.
Unfortunately, this is going to lead to more touch points with probably law enforcement. This is going to lead to probably a higher risk of dropout.
Olatunji says based on her interactions with students, she's surprised the absence numbers aren't even higher.
I have had a student experience homelessness in this pandemic and could not go to school because their family was bouncing around from home to home and friends' places. I have had a student who the business that they were working at told them that if they didn't start taking on more hours, they would lose their job.
I've never seen numbers with this many students absent.
Kachara Bradford is the Deputy Superintendent of Learning for the state-controlled Providence schools. She says attendance was not enforced this year due to the unusual circumstances of the pandemic.
We also paused things that we used to do, such as truancy court or sending truancy officers to homes. Instead, we really embraced that we wanted everyone to take their health and safety first.
So at what point do you go back to having consequences for missing school?
So I think that's really what we're looking at for the fall.
This summer, the district is targeting those chronically absent students for its new summer learning and fun program. 1,800 students have signed up.
With targeted supports for students, wraparound, social emotional learning, and then also filling in any gaps that they may have missed throughout this current school year.
And this fall, the standalone virtual learning academy is not returning. Bradford hopes bringing everyone back in person will bring those absence rates down.
There is a real need for us to return to that connected face-to-face space.
Improving attendance is one of the goals of the state turnaround of Providence schools. The goal is to get that chronic absenteeism rate down to 10% of students by 2025. I'm Steph Machado, 12 News.
Steph, thank you. And this Target 12 investigation continues on WPRI.com, where there's a school-by-school breakdown of absence rates this year in Providence. And you can also see how often virtual students logged on to class.